Hello everyone, welcome to Physio Classroom. This is Dr. Rucha Rayas, Assistant Professor in Cardiovascular and Respiratory Physiotherapy Department at Sancheti College of Physiotherapy, Pune. And today I'll be talking about the topic humidifiers and nebulizers as an adjunct to chest physiotherapy. I'll just share my screen. Okay. Right. So basically what I'm going to cover today is some basic concepts of how humidifiers and nebulizers work. We will be learning about what is the definition of each of these terminologies, the principles of working of both humidifiers and nebulizers, both of their types, and how exactly are they used as an adjunct to chest physiotherapy. So let's begin with humidification. When I say humidification, basically what all we are going to go through is the definition, indications, principles of working, types, and how it is used. So, okay, so what does humidification exactly mean? So we are kind of, used to the term humidity. So when I say humidity, we are talking about the amount of water vapor in the air, right? So the process of formation of water vapor or water evaporated in its gaseous form is basically what humidification means. So what we are trying to do is artificially condition the gas being introduced into the patient by adding water vapor to it, right? Now these systems or humidification systems may or may not use heat, okay? We'll be talking about that a little bit more in detail. So if you look at this image here on the right, there is a source of water and it is being evaporated into its molecular form. Okay. Moving on. Why exactly is humidification needed? Okay. So let's go through functions of the upper respiratory tract. When I say upper respiratory tract, that includes everything from the nose, the nasal cavity, the sinuses, the part of the pharynx, all the way down to the larynx, till the point of epiglottis. Okay. So, what exactly is the upper respiratory tract doing here? So, it's bringing about filtration of air that I'm breathing in, humidification, and regulation of temperature. So, it is found that by the time air reaches the lower respiratory tract, it is all nice and filtered. So, all the foreign particles are out. The air gets humidified because the nasal mucosa has a lot of glands in it which secrete mucus, which has a lot of water content. That water gets transferred into the air being inhaled inside. Okay, and regulation of temperature, it makes the air warm so that before it reaches the lower respiratory tract, it gets warmed up to body temperature. Now, why are all of these functions of the upper respiratory tract important? Why am I talking about this? How is it helping? So, it helps to maintain viscosity of airway secretions, this particular humidification function that we are talking about. It helps to protect the respiratory tract. How? Because mucus forms a part of line of defense. When I say line of defense, it means it is protecting my respiratory tract against foreign particles. Humidification allows for adequate ciliary function. Everyone knows about ciliated epithelium present in the respiratory mucosa, which helps to mobilize mucus and other particles which get stuck into it outside or out of the body. So thereby helping for easy mucociliary clearance. Okay, so from all of this, what do we gather all together? That humidification is somehow going to be used to aid in airway clearance as a chest physiotherapy technique. Now, when do I need humidification or in whom is it indicated? In my clinical practice, when am I going to see patients requiring humidification? So think about it this way. Anything that interferes with the functions of your upper respiratory tract, that's where you're going to need humidification because that was its natural function, but now it's not being achieved. So we have to do it artificially for the body. Okay. So let's go through examples. First is the use of supplemental oxygen. Now, supplemental oxygen, which is commercially available, it's a dry gas. Okay. So if I give that to a patient, and the patient starts inhaling it, that dry gas, as it goes through the respiratory tract, is going to pick up a lot of moisture, and there's going to be a lot of drying of the upper respiratory tract, drying of the throat. It can cause crusting of secretions. So a lot of complications can arise. So in such cases, supplemental oxygen has to be, or by rule, is always given in combination with a humidifier. Okay, this is especially required when you are giving oxygen at a high flow rate. When I say high flow rate, okay, I should not use the term high flow rate. At flow rates above 4 liters per minute. Okay, so here you can see examples. A person is using a face mask, another one is using nasal prongs. Whenever oxygen is being delivered, especially at rates of 4 liters per minute or more, it has to be humidified. Okay. Now, one more condition is when the upper airway is bypassed. What do I mean by this? So if you see patients who have artificial airways, so in the first image here, you have a patient who has been intubated with an endotracheal tube. Okay. And in the image on the very right hand corner, you see a patient having a tracheostomy tube. Okay. Here, what is happening is air is flowing through that tube and is directly entering the lower respiratory tract. It is not passing through the upper respiratory tract, which means normally when I'm breathing, that air should come in contact with the mucosa of the upper respiratory tract for it to be humidified. But in this case, that's not happening, correct? Because you have this pilot balloon, right? And the balloon creates an airtight closure, correct? So, in such cases, it is all the more necessary that we provide some form of external source of humidity, okay? Fourth point is to soothe an irritated upper airway. Generally, when patients come out of surgery, right, and they get extubated after the surgery is done, post extubation, the larynx gets very irritated, okay, because it's had a tube inside. Now it's been removed, right? So there can be a lot of post-operative, post-extubation laryngeal edema. So very commonly, just after the patient is out of surgery, they do give a good amount of humidification, which helps in reducing that. And it helps to relieve that irritation of the upper respiratory tract. And of course, post inhalation anesthesia as well. The fifth point is in case of thick consistency of airway secretions. Now, we know a lot of conditions in which patients develop a lot of airway secretions, in which chest physiotherapy or airway clearance techniques are all the more important. In these patients, with the use of humidification, we may be able to change the consistency of these secretions a bit to help aid their removal. Now, if you look at data given in books or even in studies, humidification doesn't exactly help in changing the consistency of secretions much. However, it can help to a small extent. So something is better than nothing. Okay. Now, methods of humidification. First, I'm going to talk about systemic hydration. When I say systemic hydration, it basically means drinking water. Okay. So you are hydrating your body from within, right? Which is the best form. This basically makes sure that the mucus that is being generated by your respiratory tract has adequate amount of water in it. Okay. It's the best strategy. However, there are some drawbacks when it comes to systemic hydration. How much of water intake is okay? How much is not? Especially when it comes to patient population, it can be a bit difficult to judge this. Patients who have renal dysfunction, people who have heart failure, who are on diuretics, water restricted diets, in such cases, it can be a bit difficult to maintain good hydration levels in them. So it's always, a good idea to go for other forms of humidification in such cases. So what other forms do we have available to us? We have active humidifiers and passive humidifiers. So we'll go into a bit more detail of how exactly these work. Okay. Now, so we have active humidifiers. Active humidifiers are basically of two types. They could be heated, they could be non-heated. Okay. Did I miss a slide here? No. Okay. So when I talk about active humidifiers, we have basically 4 types: bubble through, and the passover types can be further classified into 3. You have a simple reservoir type of passover, a passover wick, and a passover membrane. We'll see all of these a bit more in detail. Now, let's go through bubble through humidifier. This is the most commonly used humidifier in hospital settings. The image on the right, I'm definitely sure you must have seen these being used for a lot of different types of patient populations. Okay. Here, what happens is, if you look at the image on the right hand side, we have a source of dry gas. So, generally, that's oxygen. It enters through this and then moves down into the container. Okay. This container is generally filled with water. Right. Now, if you see these 2 rings here, they are the markings between which the container should be filled. If it's below the lower point, that means water is too low, the humidifier may not work adequately. And if it goes beyond this point, that means the load is too much on the humidifier. Okay. So in such cases, the level is maintained anywhere between these 2 marks. Now, what will happen is, as the gas moves in, we are able to control at what flow it goes. This is the flow knob. So when you turn the knob, you can decide at what flow is oxygen being delivered, all right? And how do I know how much it is? An objective measure, the number is indicated here on the gas flow indicator. It measures it in liters per minute. Now, as the gas passes down through this, it is going to pass into the water and is going to create bubbles, right? So if we look at the image on the left, that is what has been depicted here. Okay, so dry gas is coming down here, being released into the water or under the surface of water. It will bubble through the water, pick up moisture, and then get delivered to the patient. So that's why it's called bubble through humidifier. Okay, and then this is then attached to the patient via a plastic tubing. Okay, so this is a basic functioning of bubble through humidifier. Usually bubble through humidifiers are non-heated ones. Okay, let's look at the next. Okay, so bubble through humidifier, how do we use it in practice? So whenever you get to see patients or you are actually using it in your clinical practice, you will get to see that these humidifiers are used very commonly at the bedside. So they are attached to the hospital source of oxygen. Second is the home oxygen concentrator. So these are the ones that work on electricity. And then the last one is an oxygen cylinder. So whenever a patient is being delivered oxygen from such a source, again, a humidifier has to be attached to it. Okay. Now, then we move on to passive humidifier. So, okay, wait, I'm sorry. So we spoke about bubble through. The other type is pass over humidifier. So in pass over humidifier, what happens is the mechanism is almost the same, just one small difference. If you see in bubble through, the gas passed through the water and it created bubbles and then moved to the patient. Here, the gas is going to pass over the surface of water. Okay. Now, it's a simple thing that if it has to pass over the surface of water, that means water has to be converted into its gaseous form or into vapor. Generally, we can do it with the use of heat. So, very commonly, pass-over humidifiers are heated types of humidifiers. Okay. So, if you see this center image here, which is called simple reservoir, it has a big container filled with water, and you have 2 ports on top. One is the source from where gas is going to enter. It's going to pass over the surface of water, and then that humidified air will get delivered to the patient. And this particular one has a system down below here, which can give a source of heat. So by heating, we can increase the amount of water vapor content of the air. Right? Now, apart from simple reservoir, You also have two other forms of passover humidifiers. One is called the wick type and the second is called the membrane type. Basically, the purpose of these two forms is to somehow increase the surface area over which the air is passing. Okay. So in the wick, we have these particular absorbent materials which is used. So that draws the water up and it increases the surface area available for the gas to pick up moisture from. Very similar function is of the membrane. So with the help of the membrane, it picks up on the water and makes more surface area available for humidification. Okay. Then we come to passive humidifier. So whatever we spoke about as of now was active humidification. Active means I have a different source of water and that is then being added to the air going into my patient. In passive humidifier, what am I doing? I'm making use of what is already inside the patient. Okay. So here, what is happening is, passive humidifiers are also called HMEs or heat moisture exchangers. So as the name suggests, heat moisture exchanger, which means the device is going to take heat and moisture from the patient's exhaled air. It's going to hold on to it. And then when the next breath goes inside the patient, it's going to pick up on that heat and moisture and give it back to the patient. Okay. So this is most commonly used in a ventilator circuit. So patients who are on mechanical ventilators will have this kind of a device in the circuit. So if you look at the image here in this circle, you will see how the HME unit is attached to the artificial airway and then it gets attached to the ventilator tubing. Okay. So as the patient exhales, or I should not say patient exhales, as air moves out of the patient, the HME unit will pick up on heat and moisture. It will hold it there. And then when the next breath gets delivered to the patient, that air will pick up on the heat and moisture again and take it back inside the patient. Okay, so we are not introducing anything from outside. We're just using what is inside the patient and giving it back. So that's why it's called a passive humidifier. Okay. Then there are different types. I'm not going into too much of detail of what exactly these are and the mechanism. I'll just briefly explain it so that you guys are aware that such types exist. So in passive humidifiers, you have two basic types, hygroscopic type and hydrophobic type. The terms can be a little bit confusing. Let's understand what they mean. Okay. In hygroscopic type of HME or passive humidifier, it will absorb and hold on to the water and then give it in the next breath. Okay. So if you look at the image here, we'll just quickly go through this. What is happening is, this is the inspiration, the first image. Okay. In the second image, expiration is occurring. So during exhalation, when air moves leftward, if you see this unit, it is holding on to the water. The black dots are the water droplets. Okay. And then in the next breath, the air will pick these water droplets and then get delivered back to the patient. In hydrophobic, that is the second type. Basically, hydrophobic means it is repelling water. The name itself suggests that. So it contains a water repelling substance. Okay. So first inspiration occurs. During exhalation, the water gets stuck on the surface of this chemical substance. Okay. So because it doesn't like water, it repels water. It's going to keep the water on its surface. And then with the next breath, the water will be picked up and go into the patient. Okay. So these are two basic forms of passive humidifiers. It doesn't really matter as to what substance is used inside. The mechanism basically remains the same. Then we move on to nebulization. So when it comes to nebulization, how exactly is it different from humidification, and what are the principles of working of a nebulizer? Now, if you see the image, this is what we are talking about. This is what we're going to learn more about. So, what is the definition? Nebulization is the process of delivery of aerosol particles carried into the airways with inhaled air or with inspired gas. Okay. Now, what do I mean by an aerosol? So, aerosol is a suspension of liquid particles. It could be water, it could be medication in a gas. Okay. So, if you see this image here again, this is the liquid. It could be water, it could be medication, anything else. And it is then converted into an aerosol. Understand, this is not evaporation. Okay. In humidification, we spoke about evaporation or water being converted into water vapor. Here, the liquid is being split into small droplets. Okay, these droplets form the aerosol. So if you see the image, these are larger droplets consisting of the material of the liquid. Okay, now how is this being used as an adjunct to chest physiotherapy? Okay, what is its relevance to me when I'm treating a patient? So first is medication delivery, very commonly used in most patients that we treat. Bronchodilators, right? We must have learned about PFTs being performed pre-post bronchodilator. Same thing we are talking about. Okay. So with nebulization, the bronchodilator is split into small droplets and it is then introduced into the respiratory tract. Okay. With bronchodilation, when the size of the lumen of the airways increases, I am better able to deliver my physiotherapeutic techniques to the patient. Okay. So, for example, if you have a patient who has obstructive respiratory condition, or even if the patient is knowing to have bronchospasm, once the bronchioles have dilated with the use of medication, I am better able to administer whatever interventions I wish to give. Okay, so that is why it is used as an adjunct to chest physiotherapy. Understand? Basically, these techniques are used to improve the effectiveness of my physiotherapy intervention. Okay. Second is corticosteroid therapy. It's going to help in reducing inflammation. We know how inflammation or inflamed airways can also have a narrow lumen. So if that inflammation gets relieved, again, the effectiveness of my intervention can increase. Okay. We can deliver antibiotics, antifungal medications if your patient is prescribed them. And last, of course, mucolytic agents. Very, very useful, especially in cases where secretions are very thick, very tenacious, difficult to expectorate. Patient says that, yes, I can feel secretions are present inside, but I'm just not able to cough them out. They're too thick, too sticky. In such cases, yes, mucolytic agents, if delivered using nebulization, can help break down the mucus and help make it more thinner in consistency. Okay, that makes it easier for the secretions to move out. Then next is to reduce upper airway edema. We already discussed this during humidification. Like for example, in post-operative or post-extubation laryngo edema, there nebulization can also be used. And last is sputum induction. What do I mean by sputum induction? It means that with the use of hypertonic saline, I am sort of causing some amount of irritation in the respiratory tract, which generates more amount of sputum. Okay, this is generally used in patients who, for investigation purpose, or in patients in whom we want to aid or assist in removal of retained secretions. Okay, then let's come to components of a nebulizer. So when I say I am using a nebulizer, how exactly is it going to work? What all equipment do I need? Okay. So, of course, we are talking about aerosol generation or formation of an aerosol. I need some form of a driving force for that to happen. What gives me the driving force is either compressed air or ultrasonic waves. Okay. Then, using this driving force, some mechanism takes place. because of which an aerosol is generated. We'll talk about the mechanism. Aerosol is generated, and now that aerosol has to be introduced into the patient. How am I going to do that? Using a patient interface. It could be a mouthpiece, a face mask, or a ventilator circuit or an artificial airway, right? We'll go through details of this. Driving force in a nebulizer. Now, we spoke about two driving forces, compressed air and ultrasonic waves. Now, in the first example, if you see, these are the most commonly used nebulizer systems in hospital settings, right? So these come in different shapes and sizes, but the basic concept is the same. What it does is it will take atmospheric air, the device will compress that air and push it out towards the output, the output node as fast as possible. Okay, so it creates a high velocity jet of air. Okay, so again, I repeat, the device is going to take air from the atmosphere, compress it, and then release it at a high velocity. Okay, so that is the basic driving force of the jet nebulizer. And to the right, I have ultrasonic nebulizers. So in ultrasonic nebulizers, the basic mechanism on which they work is piezoelectric effect, right? Or rather reverse of piezoelectric effect. So you have to connect these to an electrical source, and there is a crystal inside. It basically utilizes the same mechanism that we use in therapeutic ultrasound, right? So the fluid or the liquid which is to be nebulized is in contact with the vibrating crystal. Okay, those vibrations generate ultrasound, and the ultrasonic waves then pick up on the water or on the medication, creates the aerosol, which then gets delivered to the patient. Okay, so these are two basic forms of nebulizer systems. The commonest used is the jet nebulizer. So I'm going to go a bit more in detail of how exactly this works. Okay. We'll talk about the patient interface first. Like I mentioned, you have a driving force, formation of aerosol, and then a patient interface. How is the patient actually going to get that aerosol eventually? So it could be either via a face mask, like in the first image, or via a mouthpiece, like in the second image, or it can be connected in a ventilator circuit. However, here, most important point, you have to remember that the nebulizer has to be connected to the inspiratory limb of the ventilator circuit. Okay. Even by mistake, if you connect it to the expiratory limb, it is not going to be beneficial to the patient. Whatever nebulized medication is there is going to travel back into the ventilator, not towards the patient's respiratory tract. So always remember, if the chamber or if the nebulizer system is being used for a patient on a mechanical ventilator, please connect it to the inspiratory limb. Okay, let's come to the principles on which a nebulizer works. There are four basic principles, out of which the first two are the most important ones. You have Bernoulli's principle, which then gives rise to Venturi effect. You have Baffle action and capillary action. So let's go through what each of these means. Now, coming to Bernoulli's principle and Venturi effect. When I say Bernoulli principle, it's a basic fluid mechanics principle, which you learn about in physics. So to put it very simply, in the simplest terms possible, whenever gas or liquid is flowing at a low velocity, it is surrounded by high pressure. When it is traveling at high velocity, it is surrounded by low pressure. That's it. That's Bernoulli's principle. So in this first image, this particular air or fluid, whatever it is moving from left side to right side. Okay. If you see, this tube is not of the same diameter. The diameter suddenly reduces in between. So to simply give you an example, imagine you are watering plants in the garden, right? And you have a hose, correct? And water is flowing out of it. If I try and compress the end of that hose, that means I reduce the lumen the water starts moving at a higher velocity. Simple to remember. That is exactly what is happening here. So if you see, the large lumen eventually becomes smaller and smaller. When the lumen becomes small, the flow is at high velocity. Okay. When the flow is at high velocity, that area is surrounded by low pressure. Okay. Now, what is happening here? Let's look at the image that is given down below. Okay. You have a gas source. Gas is moving from left side to right side. Okay. But this particular tubing has a tapering end. Okay. Because of the tapering end, as it moves from left side to right side, when it is going to go through the small opening, it's going to move out at high velocity. When it moves out at high velocity, it is going to be surrounded by low pressure. Okay. Always remember, flow occurs from high pressure to low pressure. Correct? So, we have somehow created a low pressure zone here. How do I make use of this further? Okay. This is where Venturi effect comes into picture. Okay. So let's look at this image. Okay. So understand, suppose there is liquid or medication moving from this input source. Okay. It moves here. It is going left to right. Okay. Now the lumen reduces. So velocity increases. Okay. Remember the hose example. When it moves at high velocity and it comes out of this tube, it is surrounded by low pressure. So I have created a low pressure zone here, correct? Now, if I give a small opening to this system, air from the atmosphere will move towards this low pressure zone because flow occurs from high pressure to low pressure, right? So as the liquid or medication moves out, it is going to be driven by this air. Okay. Now, moving ahead, what is capillary action and baffle action, and how is it coming into picture when I'm talking about a nebulizer? Okay. Now, this image on the left, this particular chamber, just the photograph of which we have seen way too many times already. This is called a Hudson chamber. Okay. Now, a Hudson chamber basically consists of a reservoir or a container for the medication or saline or whatever material you wish to introduce into the respiratory tract. It has an air inlet down here through which air will be moving upwards. Okay. Then it has, you see this green colored piece here. Okay. That sits on top of this nozzle. Okay. The round semicircular shaped part, that is called the baffle. And then this outlet above here is from where the aerosol will then reach the patient. Okay. Now here, what is happening? There's a simplified image on the right side. Okay. So let's use this to understand what is happening. This, the lowest end of the Hudson chamber. So this end that we are talking about, this will be attached to the driving force, or this will be attached to the jet nebulizer. Okay. So compressed air will be pushed into the Hudson chamber from this opening. Okay. When it moves upwards, if you see the lumen is reducing, so it's going to move at high velocity, correct? When it moves at high velocity, low pressure will be generated. So this medication will get drawn upwards towards the low pressure area. Now this space is very small. We know basic physics. When liquid is introduced into a small space, with capillary action, it starts being drawn upwards automatically, correct? This is where capillary action is occurring, okay? So with capillary action through this small space, medication will be drawn upwards. As the air moves up here, it's going to move out at a high velocity and it's going to carry the fluid or the medication with it, and that will hit the baffle. Okay, so the baffle basically acts like an obstacle in the way. Okay, so when this medication hits the baffle, it gets split into small particles that forms the aerosol. Okay. This aerosol is then delivered to the patient. Now we come to a recent change in the practices now in these COVID times. You must have heard a lot about aerosol generating procedures and how it can cause a risk to cross infection in patients, right? So we have to, of course, adapt to the change and avoid this as much as possible. However, there are a lot of patients who rely on medications to be introduced via nebulizers, right? And of course, they cannot go off these medications. It is necessary for them to take their regular doses. So, how to go about this in a safer way? Okay. So, there are certain special precautions to be taken, whether you are nebulizing a medication in a home setting or if you are doing the same in a hospital setting. So, when it comes to a home setting, what kind of care can you take? Of course, you have to have good nebulizer hygiene. Okay. So, make sure that your devices are regularly cleaned. They have to be cleaned and dried in the sun, preferably, and then used. So, good nebulizer hygiene. Avoid using a nebulizer with other people around you. So, preferably be in a secluded room of your house and then use the device. Avoid using it in a closed environment. So, make sure that there are open windows or well ventilated spaces where you can make use of the device. Okay, and of course, maintain good social distancing. Then, when it comes to a hospital setting, of course, you have a lot more precautions to be taken. Strict sanitary measures, no doubt about that. Use of personal protective equipment or PPE. These days, certain hospitals are equipped with something called as a negative pressure room, which means that there is a source generally over the ceiling, which has this continuous negative pressure suction happening, because of which the air inside the room doesn't remain stagnant. It keeps flowing or it keeps changing. Okay. So, in such settings, if possible, make sure that the aerosol is being delivered in a negative pressure room if available. Again, social distancing between the patient who is getting the aerosolized medication and the healthcare personnel. Dispose of the equipment after it has been used, and preferably or rather strictly have equipments for specific patients. So if a particular patient is using a certain nebulizer device, keep it constant for that patient. Do not wash and reuse for anyone else. Okay, so understand that agreed, times are changing, lot of precautions to be taken. However, despite all of that, the risk of spread of infection can be controlled with adequate measures. So I basically wanted to explain this topic as simply as possible. I've tried to cover the basic concepts of humidification and nebulization. I hope everyone got to learn something from this. Of course, there's a lot more to it. I've tried to stick to the basics. So that's it about humidifiers and nebulizers. And we will see you in the next session. Thank you.